Welcome to STARS Launch Pod, where we chat with innovators who are overcoming challenges, pushing boundaries, and collaborating to make space more accessible and sustainable for humanity, one launch at a time.
It's one small step for man.
Here's your host, Susan Wise.
Hi, and welcome to STARS Launch Pod, Space Technology and Research Sciences, brought to you by starsciences.org, where we connect, collaborate, and accelerate. I'm your host, Susan Wise. And joining us this time is Austin Morris, co-founder and CTO at Morris Incorporated, or KMI. Austin, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
Let's get into exactly what you do at Morris a little bit. Give us a little overview, and then kind of let us know what you're doing right now to further the space industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So KMI broadly is working on in-space relocation and maneuvering of assets on orbit. So essentially being able to either extend the life or reposition or boost up into orbit objects that have already been launched into space, as well as those that have yet to be launched. So my role specifically as CTO is leading the technology development for the company, working on demonstrating our technologies and capabilities to actually execute those things. And specifically, the most recent success we've had on that front was a demonstration that we did on the International Space Station from, we launched November last year, November 24, through, I think it was April of 25. We had about 6 operation sessions over roughly 5 months. And that was demonstrating our capability to grapple unprepared objects in space and move them around. So
this
we were
your octopus thing, right? With
the
all the
octopus,
arms.
right? Yeah. So this is a technology that we call REACH, but it's well known by a lot of folks as the robot space octopus, and it's specially designed basically to grab onto any number of different objects, regardless of their size, shape, material makeup, any variety of parameters there, and be able to move it to wherever it needs to go. So we were fortunate to work with crew on station, including Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore, who were up there and pretty well-known household names while they were up there for a little longer than planned.
Right.
And we also got to work with Don Pettit and Takuya Onishi and had the best time and collected immense amounts of valuable scientific data from all those operations. So very pleased with how that went. Now we're working on the next step, which is preparing all of the revisions and iterations that we're doing based on everything we learned from there to build towards the full spacecraft and full demonstration that we're aiming to launch here in the next 2 years or so.
This is so exciting. So you're moving around satellites, or maybe a satellite that's about to go defunct?
That's exactly right. And the wonderful capability that our technology enables is historically, humanity has had kind of a preemptive need to dispose of satellites because let's say you have a satellite that has a critical component like an onboard computer and you have 3 of them, 1 primary and 2 backups. The first one lasts 10 years and then fails, no big deal, switch to a backup. Second one lasts another 7 years, no big deal, switch to the third one. The third one, depending on how you math out that line, is going to last anywhere from 4 to 7 to 10 years. And instead, historically, we've had to deorbit that spacecraft immediately because we can't run the risk of that third one failing. And now we have this uncontrolled, debris object essentially in orbit.
Right.
What we're taking as an approach is keep it going, leave it up there, run it till the wheels fall off, so to speak, and let it operate until it well and truly dies. And then we can come in, grapple that object, and then dispose of it after the fact, rather than having to do it preemptively. So satellites that are either nearing end of life have already reached end of life, as well as any objects that are up there that may not be satellites, rocket bodies that are left up there after deploying their payloads, any number of different assets that are up there, even if it is that the operational need of an asset changes, we can grab it and relocate it to a different orbit so that it can perform a different mission or, modify that mission. There's a lot of different use cases to the capability.
That's exciting. And it is getting a little crowded up there too. So
certainly,
I'm sure you've had your challenges along the way. What was one of your biggest challenges and how did you overcome it, Austin?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say probably the biggest challenge for us was finding the business model. We started originally KMI with the focus on orbital debris. The 3 of us, myself and my 2 co-founders, Adam and Troy, we identified that there was a risk growing in orbit with the ever-present growing population of debris, space junk left behind by
Right.
human operations in space, and looked at it and realized that it was a problem that was getting worse and worse and wasn't really getting addressed by anyone. And as, young space professionals early in our career, all wanting to have a long career in space, we might be able to do something about this problem. The issue that we kept running into was basically it's perceived as tragedy of the commons, right? Where if there's litter in the park, it affects everybody, so nobody feels individually responsible. Nobody wants to be the one to pay for it because, well, shouldn't they also pay for it? And they should, and they should, and they should. So we started looking into it and digging a little deeper. And that was, I think, the biggest challenge we had at first was overcoming that issue. How we got through that was basically diving into the data and looking at conducting the analysis of what are the objects in space that actually pose risk to other objects, and can we identify any objects that don't affect everybody, that don't pass through every orbit, but affect only a specific few or even one operator. We progressively got further and further with that before finally realizing most of the objects we were looking at that had frequent conjunctions were, in fact, a single object threatening a single constellation of objects by passing through that designated orbit over and over and over again. And further, we realized, and this was our kind of big aha moment, that most of the time that object that was passing through was a defunct object from that same constellation. So it was operators who were being threatened, so to speak, by their own
their own stuff. Yeah.
Right. That they couldn't do anything about because it had been that example of, the critical component failed. And so it was stuck there and in the way. And in a lot of cases, those operators didn't even realize that the thing that they kept dodging over and over again was their own asset because, they hadn't dug into the data. They were just focused on keeping everything that was alive still alive. It was fair. So we were able to refine that a lot and identify this isn't really a tragedy of the commons problem. It's a tragedy of the council or even individual when we can break it down to that specific, this object is only a risk to you. And here is the amount of revenue that you lose per year based on interruptions to your service, having to move your objects out of the way and back to dodge this. And if we can come in and remove that problem for you for less than the cost of that lost revenue, that's a pure financial win for both sides.
That only makes sense. Yeah.
Exactly. So a big focus we've had has been on efficiency, lowering the cost, making sure that it does make financial sense for our customers as well as obviously for us, because there's otherwise going to perpetually be that problem of shouldn't somebody else pay for it? And it's really a prompt of narrowing it down to nobody else is going to, it's only you. And that kind of dramatically changed the discussion, definitely.
Yeah. So that's just one of the things that you do. Let me ask you this. Can you go up and say, provide some other type of service for someone's satellite? Say they wanted to add something to it. Are you able to do that?
Yeah. So there's a complex answer to that I'll simplify.
Okay.
So yes, there's a couple different options that a lot of people think of in terms of in-space servicing. We think of repair or refueling, things like that. And that side of things isn't something we're necessarily diving into, mostly because there are others in the space already working on that and doing an excellent job. And there's no reason for us to compete on that if we already have more than enough that we're biting off to chew here.
Right.
What we can do, though, is augment objects in space. So in addition to Reach, the robot space octopus, we've also been working on a technology that we call Asteria, which is essentially a barnacle, for lack of a better term, that kind of Velcros to the side of an object already in orbit. It's not actually Velcro, of course, but as an analogy. So it's something that we can install on the outside of a satellite that's already up in orbit. Again, just like with Reach, regardless of shape, size, material, it doesn't rely on, magnetism or anything like that. It allows us to install this module, this Asteria module on the side of an asset in orbit. And Asteria itself can carry a payload that then allows us to add, propulsion or add communications or better location tracking or any number of end uses that Asteria can carry. It allows us to augment those things already up in space, especially useful for satellites that were launched, years ago before certain capabilities exist, that now the operator wants to have that capability on board. Asteria can essentially bring that up, carry it, and attach it to the side.
So is there a person, or is this AI, or how is it doing the octopus? Who's the director here?
Yeah. Fair question. So it's a combination of a couple of features, but it's mostly a remotely driven operated vehicle. So the spacecraft itself, and I'm throwing a lot of names out here, but the overall spacecraft that's going to carry Reach and Asteria, we call the spacecraft Laylaps. And that's named after the Greek mythological hound that never failed to catch what it was hunting. So in the case of pursuing something and catching it, it felt an appropriate name.
Okay.
So Laylaps is the spacecraft that's going to carry all these things. And the way that it moves from place to place in orbit is by essentially taking inputs from our team on the ground of, here's where Laylaps is, here's where the object we're trying to reach is, let's conduct that analysis and plot a course to get from point A to point B, and then we feed that up to the spacecraft. It executes that and then sends us back feedback. Well, so once we get there all the way up close to the point of using the octopus and installing Asteria, things like that, that's where a lot more of that gets handed over to the spacecraft, because there's a lot of consideration that needs to be made for communications delay, which, from Earth to Mars is significant. From Earth to low Earth orbit isn't as much. It's only a couple of seconds. But when we're doing these kinds of dynamic operations with objects that might be tumbling or objects that aren't otherwise under control, it's a different environment than, say, docking on ISS, which can be done hands-on because you have control of both things. So in the interaction for Reach, a lot of that is going to be handled by the spacecraft, essentially putting together through an algorithm, looking at, here's what data I'm collecting about the object I'm going to grab. Here's my plan for how to grab it, send it down to the ground, have a human operator review it and say, yes, this is a good plan, go ahead. And then the spacecraft will autonomously execute that entire plan to do that kind of grapple and attachment. So it's a little bit of human and machine working together.
Okay. Will Laylaps stay in orbit, or is it going to go up and back for each job that you're working on?
Great question. So there's, again, a little bit of both in that we are going to be intentionally operating Laylaps in a way that we go, I'll use some made up numbers, but reasonable, realistic numbers. Let's say we're grabbing something at 800 kilometers altitude. We'll grab that object with Laylaps at 800 kilometers. If it's to be deorbited and brought back to atmosphere, which is one of many possibilities, but let's say that's the option, we'll bring it down to 300 kilometers, 250 kilometers, somewhere around there. Laylaps and Reach effectively will release that object, and Laylaps will boost back up into higher orbit while the object we release deorbits. We will then go back up to orbit, grab another piece, do that again. Grab another piece, do that again, and do that repeatedly. In the case of an object not necessarily being deorbited, that changes it a little bit just in terms of where are we going, but it's essentially still the same operation. If we're boosting it up to a graveyard orbit or repositioning it, the same idea in that we point A, point B, and back to do it again.
When are we looking at sending Laylaps out?
First planned launch is currently scheduled for Q4 of 2027. So we're about 2 years out from when we're planning to launch the first full spacecraft. There are some aspects that are driving that timeline and may shift it, based shutdowns and other related things, but that is the current timeline. So I would expect sometime here in the next couple of years, we'll be launching that full demonstration to showcase the overall thing. In the meantime, there's a lot of work going on the ground, as well as we might do a couple more in-space demos between now and then for some of the kind of component technologies, but the overall mission we're aiming for in about 2 years.
This is very exciting stuff. What one piece of advice would you like to share with our listeners before we start to wrap up?
That's a great question. I would say, man, boiling it down to one, there's so many. In the, 6 years since we started KMI, me, Troy, and Adam, as well as the rest of our team, certainly have all learned a lot. And I think that progressively makes it harder and harder to pick one. If I were to pick one, I think the piece of advice I'd give, and this is hopefully relevant broadly, is don't be afraid to try something. Don't be afraid to experiment. There is a lot of different ways to go about anything you want to do. And the only way to start figuring out if you're on the right path is to try it out. And as far as I'm concerned, find out whether you're going to fail. And if you're going to fail, you might as well fail fast rather than spend a lot of time getting there.
Exactly.
So don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try things. And I think the most important lesson thereafter is find out how to do it differently or better next time, because failure certainly teaches us a lot more than success.
I also want to throw in, I think because I have talked to your other partners, I feel like there's a really tight bond there and a lot of support so that you get from each other. So it's great that you have such a great connection with your partners in this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're extremely fortunate to have found each other. I mean, Troy and I found each other very early on, as he's my older brother. I found him when I was born. But Adam and I met back in college as roommates freshman year. And I think the three of us are very, very fortunate to not only have met each other and have, found that we can work well together, but also have realized that and taken advantage of that. I think we all reflect very often on our path thus far and realize that this is a journey that none of us could have done alone. And that expands even beyond just the three of us out to our incredible team of Space Rangers that we've built alongside us, as well as all the partners and supporters we've had along the way. But even from the very beginning, I think having the unified vision, having the immense amount of trust in each other that we have is something that's really special. And I'm very, very glad that we've found it. Starting a company in general, and especially a space company, is a very hard endeavor. And embarking on that journey alone is a bold one. I often reference the quote, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together." I think that rings very true for us.
It is, and you can tell, especially since I've got to talk to all of you. I love that. Now, I realize that, KMI is your passion, but is there another passion project, either past or present, that you'd like to mention?
Once again, so many. I think that's something that we pride ourselves on at KMI, is that the team at large is so driven. And that's not exclusive to just our day jobs, our mission. There's a lot of hobbies and a lot of passion projects around amongst the whole team. Some of us from, supporting community events and education outreach. Some of us from running, Dungeons and Dragons games and tabletop role playing. And in my case, all of the above, as well as participating in, as you may have guessed from some of the things on the wall behind me, if you can see, I'm a pretty big Star Wars fan, and there's a Star Wars costuming club that I've been a part of for a number of years called the 501st Costuming Club. And it's a charity organization that works with a lot of different charities, especially children's charities, to both raise money as well as make visits to kids and children's hospitals and things like that. And that's something I've been a part of for now a couple of years, and is definitely a huge passion of mine that certainly is not anything that's going to be paying the bills in the daytime, but it's nice, especially having founded a company as an engineer. I don't get to do much engineering nowadays, as I'm doing a lot more strategy and things. So it's nice to be able to get a little more hands-on in the evenings. But there's a lot that our team, myself included, gets into both in and around space that often harkens back. I was originally inspired to get into space because of Star Wars. So it's a nice little full circle in a certain way.
I love it. Austin, thank you so much for sharing your passion, what you've got going on at KMI and your story. And I know that KMI it's going to be part of the space program for many years to come. And I'm very excited for what you guys have going on. I can't wait to see everything get launched and, things happening in the next year or two. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Be sure to join us where we connect, collaborate, and accelerate. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and subscribe. Until next time, keep looking up. Thanks, Austin.
Thank you so much.
Don't miss an episode. Subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. Watch us on YouTube and follow us on social media. Stars Launch Pod, propelling us forward, one launch at a time.